Whenever I read this miscellaneous thoughts document, I think to myself, there couldn't be a better test for anyone thinking today in the 21st century that they might or might not have a call to serve in the ordained ministry. As Newton's biographer, I was tremendously excited when I came across this marvellous document, Miscellaneous Thoughts on an Important Subject. Just to put this in context, Newton was a few weeks short of his 33rd birthday. He was a man who hadn't had any formal education, although he was astonishingly well self-educated. He'd only left the slave trade some 4 years earlier, but had been deeply involved ever since in Christian lay ministry. But he wasn't sure whether or not he had a true vocation to become an ordained minister. This is my own biography of John Newton, and one of the most exciting chapters is a call to ordination, and that is focused on Newton's own writings in Miscellaneous Thoughts on an Important Subject. And it was a chapter when I wrote it which gave me tremendous excitement and a biographer's joy in being able to follow Newton's footsteps as he goes through this great journey of self-examination. I loved writing this particular passage. Miscellaneous Thoughts is his diary-style self-testing of whether or not he has a vocation for the ordained ministry. It's a really impressive document for several reasons. First of all, Newton roots his self-examination in Scripture. He takes 4 particular passages of Scripture: First Epistle of John, Paul's Epistle to Timothy, Paul's Epistle to Titus, and John chapters 14 to 17, and he works his way through these great passages with relentless self-examination. Then he looks at himself personally, considers all the things he'll have to give up, considers all the things he'll have to take on in terms of responsibility. And then he worries, like anything, about whether or not his ego, which he refers to as Mr. Self, whether he is going to be an obstacle to a good ministry. And finally, what comes across, besides all these qualities of doctrine and scripture and self-examination, is Newton's personal humility. That shines through as he finally reaches the conclusion that yes, God has called him to the ordained ministry. I think that even though this document was written in the 18th century, in 1758, it is just as relevant now to any young person who worries as to whether or not they have got a true call from God, and whether they should now examine themselves in front of God to see whether they are called to the ordained ministry. It's still a wonderful test to walk in Newton's footsteps and to examine oneself on the question of, have I got a call for the ordained ministry? I couldn't recommend it more to anyone whose mind is turning in that direction. I have presented this excellent digest of John Newton's thoughts called Ministry on My Mind to the college where I studied theology for 2 years, Wycliffe Hall, Oxford. And I've done that because I believe that even though what Newton wrote is over 250 years old, it's still totally relevant today to any person whose mind is turning towards the possibility of ordination, to read this pamphlet and to see how Newton's thoughts ran, and then perhaps to follow in the same path of thought themselves. It's a wonderful guide to have I or have I not got a call to ordination.